Good evening, this is the Town of Sheldon Selectboard and Water Commissioner regular meeting, Monday, December 8th of 2025. The agenda for this evening under new business is we've got a People's Trust Company line of credit renewal, Taylor Quinton request wastewater permit fees. And we got town administrator's report. We need to sign and approve the minutes from November 24th meeting. We need to sign and approve warrant 2537, warrant 31710. And under old business, we've got the salt shed project update, personnel policy, purchasing policy, and Sheldon school law. Is there anything else we need to add?
I don't believe so.
The town clerk.
Oh, yes, sorry, the town clerk did put a report in for you guys.
We can review that, yeah.
Which includes a delinquent tax report and just a water billing update, et cetera. Just a general.
Okay, we'll jump right into this People's Trust. So they will automatically renew our line of credit. No signatures needed if we get approval before maturity. 12-month rate will be 2.25% fixed rate. To renew this automatically, I will just need minutes of approval with the board and a most recent budget from the town of Sheldon to verify where the interest on the line is paid from in the budget, and you've gotten that to us?
Yes. Yeah.
So I guess I just need a motion to accept this renewal, automatic renewal of the line of credit. Right now, there's the only thing on it is the salt shed.
Yeah, right. This year we didn't really end up using it
Okay.
for whatever reason, but it's there.
But it's there, yeah, it doesn't cost anything when you're not using it, so. All right, I'll accept the motion to renew this line of credit.
I'll make the motion to renew the line of credit.
All right,
I'll second the motion to renew our line of
all in
credit.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Thank you.
And then we'll look for the paperwork on the salt shed line later on.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the Taylor Quinton?
So I put this on here because it's been, this is an issue that's been coming for a little while, and I kind of had to kick back and forth between Danielle and between our zoning administrator and our assessor about it. But I just put it on there because so there's Taylor Quinton bought a lot down off the Bedard Road from Steve Trombley's. He has several lots out there. We approved the new private road out there last year. When that private road was created, it created new E911 addresses for all those lots. And basically, Taylor was informed of the wrong E911 address, and they made they got a wastewater permit issued with the wrong E911 address, and now they're having, I think that there was some, I'm not sure if it was loan paperwork or what it was, but this is causing problems where they need to get that corrected. And they basically emailed the town saying, hey, this is what I was told by the town. There's an error here. I need to get my permit fixed, and there's going to be a fee for that. And then we were kind of had to go back and forth to figure out what was the source of this error. And because obviously Danielle's the E911 coordinator, but the town and the state issued the correct E911 address to them, which is 91 Valhalla Drive. And so then but for whatever reason, when I noticed that in our grand list, it was listed with 90 Down Holland Drive as the parcel ID. So then I asked Justin about it, and Justin said the source that he got for changing the parcel ID was the property transfer tax stuff. So whoever filled that out, which wasn't somebody from the town, got it wrong, and that's sort of the fruit of the from which all this sprung. So I discussed it with obviously the landowner's having to deal with how this, with this problem, and is basically asking the town to cover this fee, but I discussed it with the town attorney, and he said that it's not really our fault because it's whoever filled out this property tax return, that's where the town got the information from.
So Daniel had it recorded properly.
Yeah, it was recorded properly by the zoning administrator.
Was he sent a letter with the?
I believe he was. Yeah. So right. Yeah. So. But the engineer who was working on the septic permit emailed Justin to get the parcel ID, and Justin told him what he thought that the E911 address was based on the information he'd been given when the property was sold. So that's how it all happened here. Yeah.
The mistake did come out of the office.
Right, sort of, but it's not really Justin's mistake. He just copied the same mistake that somebody else made, unfortunately. So, yeah. One of those things where it would be nice to have everybody talking together on the same issue, but. So I said I discussed this with the town attorney. He's recommending that this is not the town's fault for doing this, and that he said I should have Danielle basically write a letter saying that the town, gave it the correct E911 address, but because of this property transfer tax form, which the town did not fill out, incorrect information was relayed to them, and basically explain the town's position in a letter. And
so that's where it got screwed up when they filled out the property transfer.
Right, exactly. And I'm not sure if the E911 was assigned before or after that happened.
Attorney do that, or?
Yeah. It was either the seller's attorney or it was somebody involved in the real estate transfer. So. Anyway, I'm not sure what I put it on the agenda because it was referred to me, but I talked with the attorney about it today, and he's recommending that this is not the town's fault and that we just issue that letter, and hopefully that helps them out with the state. But
what's the cost of the permit?
I believe it's like $100 or $150 if I have to.
Cost you that much to call the attorney?
Yeah, I know.
Well, that's
Right.
what do we jump through?
I did talk to him about a number of other things, but yes. Yeah.
Okay. I know they charge by the minute or 30 seconds.
Well,
So, I'll take action on
Just-
just have this
go with the attorney recommendations.
What was the owner asking for? Asking to waive that fee?
I think he basically wants the town to pay the fee to the state for them, so.
Again,
Or be
so,
reimbursed somehow.
right, and if it's not our doing, not a mistake that the town made, then
Yeah, the lawyer says we're covered, and at that point,
Yeah, that's what he's recommending.
yeah, I wouldn't
So
want to set a precedent that that's just always us covering for people, I
We'll
guess.
go with the lawyer's recommendation, I guess. It sounds like everybody agrees to that. All right. You got a report, Laura?
Yeah, so following up with the theme of discussions I had with our attorney, because I had a lot of little things to ask about. 'Cause, 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 Well, and I'll refer you to James' report somewhat on the delinquent tax and also abatement. I'm not sure if that's addressed in her report, but we had, in our last meeting, we talked a little bit about how she had sent notice out to people about tax abatement, and we also discussed whether the abatement board should be hearing appeals regarding abatement of water and sewer fees as well. But there was an issue that Jane wanted me to discuss with our attorney, which is that because a lot of other delinquent tax collectors are paid by the commission fee, right? But in the town of Sheldon, and I looked it up, we did vote to have her paid a salary instead of being paid out of fees. Jane was concerned about whether or not she could be sitting on the board of abatement when dealing with tax, with those sorts of matters, because if she was paid by commission, then she would have an interest in whether the taxes were abated, because it would obviously affect her. But I discussed it with the attorney, and he said because we only pay them the salary, it doesn't affect how much she's paid, so that won't be a problem for her. And then we also had another question about, we were trying to determine what was the level of interest that we charge on delinquent taxes and how exactly that's assessed, because I think Kim happened to be here last week and got into a discussion about that with her, and she wasn't sure that she had done that, she had assessed the delinquent interest correctly. But again, I looked through the town meetings and I go all the way back to 1973 when we established that we do have a 1% interest penalty, or not penalty, interest that's charged on taxes. And Jim confirmed to me that that is, the town can assess that on a part of a month as well as a whole month. So the discussion that Jane had, Kim thought that we should have waited until December 1st to charge interest on the delinquent tax, but what Nemrick and some other town clerks were telling Jane is like, no, you can charge it for the month of December, or November, the half month of November as well. And anyway, Jim basically confirmed that there is some discrepancy from, towns have some leeway in terms of exactly when they assess the interest on the taxes, but what Jane has done is perfectly fine as far as he's concerned. It may be something slightly different from what Kim did, but anyway, but it does sort of highlight, just because Jane's being very thorough, I think, about, trying to understand what her role is and how she does these things, but it does sort of bring up that the reason I want to discuss it with you, with the select board, is that there are a lot of these questions that have been brought up to the voters in quite a long time. The town could charge up to 1.5% interest on, for the first 3 months, you can only charge 1%, but thereafter you can actually charge more if you wanted to. This was brought up, I think this was voted on maybe 15 years ago, and the voters said no to increasing it, but it hasn't often been, we've voted every year to, on whether the treasurer should collect the taxes. But a lot of the other questions regarding taxes as to when they're collected, when they're due, what interest and penalty, etc., those haven't been voted on in a long time. I don't know that there's a great demand to do so, but it might be a good idea for us to vote on when the taxes are due. I think the town used to have a policy where we had installments, and there was some for, if you paid early, you got a discount for taxes.
Yeah, that's what it used to be.
And we could, I think some towns do that still. I don't think there is much.
I don't think it can anymore. I think that's why Sheldon stopped doing it, because the state said you couldn't do that.
Oh, okay, well.
You couldn't have an incentive for lowering their tax bill.
Right. Well, the other thing is that we don't, need, now that we have a line of credit and we, the way that we do our fund accounting so that we are borrowing money from ourselves is a lot of the time, there's less need for cash flow throughout the year. So,
Right.
but there are towns that collect in installments just because people prefer to have it done that way.
Yeah, I know there's that.
So, anyway, it's just something to think about for the warning or just for the future is maybe some of these questions should be brought up periodically to.
Yeah, maybe you ought to, while you're thinking of it, make a list of things then we can look at them and decide to put some of them on the warning or not any of them or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was another thing I discussed with Jim today, just because there were questions that Jane was concerned about. But I have, and just because occasionally things like this have come up where I've had to look back at when was the last time we talked about this, I have made a little database for myself of, I've gone back to
How far
probably
back?
about 20 years so far of when we asked certain questions on the warning, but I'd like to, I'm not spending a lot of time on that, but every once in a while I add on to that to help us understand where things, well, I think I told you I've gone back, and I'd like to share this in the report, is telling people when the funds were established for, the highway equipment or the fire department equipment, just so people get some context for why the town has these funds and what we do with them. So that, but it's also just important to know, like, that things were established according to the correct processes and all that. I did, we can discuss this a little bit when we get into the personnel policy, but I did clarify, I did get some clarification from Jim regarding what the town is allowed to do with comp time, and even though there's a statutory cap on how many hours employees are allowed to carry over, he said that we can set a lower cap, which is essentially what we've done. So I guess I had thought that he had said the opposite of that last year, but anyway, it sounds like we can keep our comp time policy that we have now in place, which was something I was concerned about for the personnel policy. But and then he said that as we had discussed thinking about moving to a combined paid time off, and he said that the only issues that might come up with that is if there is some statutory provision where you have to provide people with time off, whether that's he wasn't really thinking of an example, but if there's some specific reason by statute you need to give people time off, whether maybe it's like town meeting, or there's certain times when you're supposed to give people time off so they can go do certain things. He said that might need to be separate from the paid time off system, but it didn't sound like a huge problem. Regarding the at the last meeting, I shared the report on the Brownfields project over here, our study that was done at the Historical Society. And I said that NRPC had kind of floated the idea of the town possibly selling that property to the Historical Society because they would be eligible for funding to do the cleanup. And I was just trying to see how involved that sale would be. Jim said that he'd be very surprised if we could get away with anything other than a complete transfer of the property, because he says there's another town he's involved with that is kind of, they're way back at the beginning, which is that they're thinking of acquiring a property and they're doing the study beforehand. And he says that usually includes a title search that goes like all the way back to the beginning of the town records. Because basically you're supposed to prove that the town has never ever had any interest in this property. So he said he'd be very surprised if we could get away with right, yeah. So and I kind of told him that all the other uncertainties we have about that with the bridge project coming up and just not knowing exactly what the town or the Historical Society really wants to do with the rest of that. And he said, yeah, you probably just want to be in a wait and see mode with that. So, and then I also discussed with him kind of our situation again regarding the school property, which unfortunately it doesn't seem like a lot of progress has been made on that, because I feel like I have said repeatedly to them, well, here's what the town's kind of, having brought this to the voters last year and the voters saying pretty resoundingly no, the town's kind of limited in what we can do. So it's really, what does the school want here? And I've not really heard definitively what they want us to do. But anyway, I'm reaching out again to the school, kind of trying to get them to take some more action on that in terms of defining what it, because, and I'm trying to reiterate to them that if they really want to, if they have a strong interest in owning that property, they're going to have to make a case to the voters about why and what they want to do with it. Because the town's kind of handcuffed to a certain extent here because of what happened. So anyway, Jim and I had a little further conversation about that, but in terms of, there are some alternatives, I guess, but the problem is that if there's, essentially the town would need to convey property somehow if the school's going to acquire any ownership in that. And like we said, that would pretty much have to have a public vote with the way that the things worked out last year. So, and the only other thing we could do is some sort of license and use agreement. And he said even a lease would be a conveyance, so, but we could give them like a license to use it, but basically that's like essentially what's the situation is right now, which is you can use it, but at any time the town could say we don't want you to use it. So I'm not sure that's going to fly for them either. So, I'm not providing a whole lot of information about this, but it's sort of the town's kind of in a situation where the school needs to really take action to get what they want, I think. And the town's willing to accommodate that, but it's not really for, the select board really can't get out ahead of the voters on this as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that's leaving the legal side of things alone here. Hunter and I have been working a little bit more on the highway budget and some planning for that. We're looking at what the town's been paying for fuel for the last couple of years, and trying to see if we could get some bids in terms of if we could try to move all or part of that, or see if we could get better pricing for one thing or another. Part of another thing that we've identified is that the town, we get exempt from sales tax, obviously on our fuel purchases, but Amanda informed me that the town also should be exempt from the excise taxes on fuel, and those are usually paid before it gets to the supplier. So that would be, it's like a reimbursement basically, where we would fill out a form saying, hey, we bought this much fuel, and it's a fair amount of money. It's like 24 cents a gallon on the diesel. So and apparently you can go back 2 or 3 years. So the town could potentially have a good chunk of change if we can. It's just a thing where we have to make sure we have all the records of what we did. So I told Hunter to make sure we keep track of the fuel bills, but. And that would include the fire department as well. I'm not sure, I don't think that, this is mostly regarding diesel fuel and gasoline, although we don't buy that much gasoline. I'm not sure so much about propane and home heat and heating oil. I'm not sure that those are, the same taxes apply on those. So, but anyway, we're working on that. We've continued to make some, I think Jane alludes to them in her report.
Yeah, I was just reading through.
Yeah.
She says that it would be propane, not gasoline, but still, that's...
Yeah, it's really the diesel is the one that we buy the most of, so that would make the biggest impact.
What about natural gas play? Is it a little different?
I'm not sure about that, Rick.
I don't see those listed, so yeah, we can check in.
again, Amanda has some experience doing this for Fairfield, so I'm gonna rely on her to help us with that in terms of, but she said that it could be, you know, enough to pay for her contract pretty much entirely. So, as Jane alludes to in there, we've made a few, we've made some progress in getting some payroll things fixed. Some of the payroll wasn't set up quite correctly for some of the employees, so that.
Yeah, she's got Hunter listed here. I don't see others listed, but I'm sure Amanda's
Yeah,
on
so
for everything.
in that case, there's actually, I think it was set up incorrectly, and we actually need to issue some reimbursement because of that. But there are other cases where the town was paying all the things it needed to pay, it was just not reporting on the employee's timesheet because of how it was entered. So, for example, I think Seth and my timesheet were correct in terms of we was reporting all of the fringe benefits and all that, but for Hunter and Nat, it wasn't for whatever reason, because it was not. The other thing is that the Social Security was not necessarily the taxes weren't necessarily being applied to the right fund, so they were being paid out of the highway fund, but the general fund was paying the taxes on it. So, I mean, the town was paying the same amount of money either way.
Right, yeah.
But from an accounting perspective, it's more correct to show it on the highway than on the general. So there's a few things like that that we have fixed. So in theory, we've got better. We're going to have better data about where the money is going as well. So they've done some more. So that, not to move too far ahead, but on the salt shed, the steel came in on Tuesday last week, I think, and they got it all put on essentially. And I think today they just put the very remaining. There was some work to be done on the front of the building, and it's all the walls are all sheathed with plywood, and we had. I talked to the contractor, and instead of putting plywood on the ceiling, we put the tri-ply flat brick that they use in dairy barns as well. I thought that would work just as well to protect the ceiling without.
Yeah.
And it would be a little less expensive. And the only thing remaining to be done over there is they left the lift so that we could install the electrical. So I think the plan is tomorrow to put the light bulbs up. And then the project should be complete. As I mentioned, I forwarded all the report there that has all the expenses to the bank, and so we should be moving forward on getting the note for that very soon, or the paperwork for that very soon. And they've ordered, I know Hunter's already ordered the salt to put in it, I thought it might come today, but it should be here tomorrow. So that'll be good that we won't be storing salt in the trucks anymore. So we're continuing to have conversations about inventory over there and some things that we can get rid of. There's some just old equipment that probably can be scrapped at this point, and other things that we might be able to sell at auction just because we seem to have a surplus of certain things that we don't really need as many as we have, and some other equipment that I think we used to use more often, but we don't. When we used to do elections down at the school, we had more need for bollards and crowd control, stuff like that. But since now we do most of the elections here at this office, and we don't seem to need those as much, so I'm not sure if I'll discuss it with Jane in terms of what she thinks we should keep or not. But there's some things over there. Anyway, before the end of the year, we're going to go over and take an inventory of things, and then I'd like to set up a lot of other towns use Auctions International to sell their surplus of things, and I think that would be a quick way to dispose of some things that we don't need as much. continuing to work on the budget for our meeting next week, and I've done a little bit of, if you guys want to, not finished yet, but here's a kind of a sample of how I'd like to maybe present the budget, in terms of how it would be reported, which is a little bit more like how it used to be done. So, for example, those are just the first two sheets of the highway. So it sort of gives some general categories, but then has a breakdown of each vendor of what was spent and how much the money went to. Obviously, I don't have all the amounts in there, but it would sort of provide more detail in terms of what materials were used and things like that, and what services we had. And it wouldn't be a one-to-one correspondence with NIMRIC necessarily. I could make it that way, but I feel like it would provide people with better, more complete information about what I spent money on. So. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me. Just a reminder that on Thursday we have the state coming to do the presentation on the bridge, 12:30. And then again next week on Thursday we'll have our second budget meeting, which will be focused on the highway. And again, hoping to, we're working on trying to get as quotes for various different projects that we could consider for that. Okay, I think that's it.
Okay. All right. That's all this stuff. All right, I'll read the minutes from the previous meeting here. Town of Sheldon Selectboard Water Commission regular meeting from November 24th of 2025. Held here at the town office at 7:30 p.m. In attendance from the select board was Stephen Dodd, Nicholas Norris, Greg Stebbins, Richard Piazmi via Zoom. Others, Hunter Kerouac, the town highway foreman, Matt Stebbins, town administrator, and Jerry Vasey from Northwest Access TV. 7:35, I called the meeting to order and read the agenda. 7:36, Hunter Kerouac delivered the highway report. Most of the gravel roads have been regraded. Road salt being stored in trucks until the salt shed project is completed. Salt shed is framed, waiting for steel to be delivered next week. The brine pump for the 2015 truck was repaired. 2018 truck had electrical service at the dealership. Guardrail on the Cane Road Bridge has been repaired. Village flag's been taken down for the winter. New and replacement road signs have been installed. Sand screener will need some reinforcement, and the sweeper on the backhoe should be repaired or replaced. Stone is placed at the end of Swamp Road, excuse me, to aid in truck turnaround. The board discussed the mailbox policy with the foreman and administrator. Hunter also mentioned the need to replace grates on the aeration tanks at the sewer plant. 8:06, Matt Stebbins asked the board for guidance regarding establishing credit accounts with businesses who require a credit card to do so. Board thought it may be preferable to have a general credit card for purchases rather than one for a specific business. 8:19, Matt Stebbins delivered the town administrator's report. The board had discussed possibly reclassifying the Swamp Road. Process would involve conducting a hearing and a site visit, including notice to abutting landowners and possibly having a survey drawn up. The board concluded it would be best to conduct a site visit this spring. Matt asked the board to review the water and sewer delinquent report and the delinquent tax collector's report. Town should review its processes regarding abatement of taxes and utility fees. Matt also discussed drafting a plan for replacing older water lines in Sheldon Town. 8:38, I read the minutes from the November 10th meeting, and the board signed warrants 2536 and 31709. Greg Stebbins moved to adopt the minutes as read, seconded by Nick, and the motion carried. 8:42, I read the minutes of the November 20th budget meeting. Nick moved to adopt the minutes as read, seconded by Greg, and the motion carried. 8:45, the board took up the proposed agreement with Northwest Regional Planning to complete road erosion inventory for the fiscal year 25 Better Roads Grant. Greg moved to approve the proposed agreement with Northwest Regional Planning, seconded by Nick, and the motion carried. I signed the agreement on behalf of the board. 8:49, the board took up the fiscal year 26 Grants and Aids Grant Agreement. The grant award is $20,000 with a 10% town match for projects to bring roads into compliance with the municipal roads general permit. Grant work will be done by September of 2026. Nick moved to approve the fiscal year 26 Grants and Aid Grant Agreement, seconded by Greg, and motion carried. I signed the agreement on behalf of the board. 8:53, Stebbins reported that Olivia DeMag has resigned from the library trustee board, and such there is a vacancy to be filled. The library trustees have nominated Jessica Draper to fill this vacancy until the 2026 town meeting. Greg nominated Jessica Draper to assume the library trustee position vacated by Olivia DeMag until the 2026 town meeting. The board approved it with all in favor. 8:56, Matt Stebbins shared the results of the recently completed brownfield study at the Historical Society property and his discussions with Northwest Regional Planning regarding next steps. Testing found elevated lead levels above acceptable levels in one test pit. Further testing regarding groundwater impact is needed. Besides additional testing, the next step is to adopt a corrective action plan. The study recommends that a 45-foot perimeter around the building be remediated and access to the rest of the property restricted. Because the town acquired the property before brownfield testing was done, the town is not eligible for state funding for corrective action. NRPC has suggested the town could sell the property to the Historical Society, which would be eligible for funding. Further discussion with the Historical Society is needed regarding plans for the property, as well as their interest in possibly owning the property. Potential impact of the bridge rehabilitation replacement project on the site was also discussed. 9:15, Nick asked if there were any plans to reformat the town report this year. Matt said he and the clerk have discussed going back to a more traditional report rather than printing the general ledger. 9:25, Nick moved to adjourn the meeting, seconded by Greg, and the motion carried. Next regular meeting is Monday, December 8th at 7:30 here at the town office. Make a motion to accept these minutes as read.
Make a motion.
Second on these.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
research on that purchasing policy and the credit card, or?
Yeah, so, it is there are two different programs that they have. One is a store account with a credit card. It is still a Citibank card, and the other is a regular, I mean, you still get a store account, but it's more of a regular Visa card. However, I'm not recalling exactly what the terms did not seem very advantageous to me. So, but the store account could only be used at the store, is my understanding. So, those are the options available to us there. And I still think it might be, I know Greg suggested maybe we should just look at getting a regular credit card and then just making current payments, and we'd only have one bill. We would only have one bill, and you could use it at any of the stores. So, which I have not discussed that with. I guess I would ask People's Trust or some other. Just I'm sure there's lots of other places we can find a credit card. So we could look at that, but again, we'd have to adjust our purchasing policy to allow for that in terms of setting a limit for how much it could be. And the other, it could be a secured credit card as well, if it was just for a $5,000 limit or however much we wanted to limit it to.
Yeah.
I haven't gone any further in terms of finding terms for that, but that seemed to be better probably for the types of purchases that we're talking about doing. Here would be a limited card that would be usable at all different stores, and then we would not have a specific. We might not get the rewards program or whatever for some of those things, but that's not that important really. So, I did want to, sorry, I was just trying to see if I could bring it up here on the screen, but I should have printed out copies of our current purchasing policy, but our current purchasing policy is kind of simple in that it only seems to, it sets, it seems to only set two sort of situations. One where we get quotes, more than one quote for something, and then but if it's over $5,000, we are supposed to do competitive bidding, and that seems to me to be pretty restrictive in terms of what, in terms of I feel like there should be a middle down category there where certainly if it's for a grant project or for something where there's federal money involved, obviously we need to use the most whatever requirements come down with regards to the grant. But there are a lot of things that the town buys that in that $5,000 to $10,000 range that, or more, like the salt contract that we get right now. We don't have competitive sealed bids for that right now. So I feel like we should be reformulating that as well, and as the currently the town clerk has the ability to use the debit card, but she's the only person authorized to use it. If you want to make a purchase with it, come talk to her about it, which is fine, but I'm not sure. We don't have, some towns specify certain amounts that like the foreman or another, like the water and sewer can spend without, as long as it's on a budgeted category. So as long as you can justify that this purchase was for, sewer maintenance operations, you're allowed to spend, whatever, $1,000, $500, whatever limit you want to set. And then if it's above that amount, then you need prior board approval in order to make purchases. Or if it's not on a budgetary category, so you're interested in something that the town had not, the select board hadn't necessarily provided a budget line item for, then obviously that's that's out, even if it's a minor, if it's $500 for security cameras, but the select board hadn't really put a line item in for security cameras, then that should be discussed with the board before you purchase it. And I guess I wanted to have a general discussion about what sort of policy you guys would be interested in before I went and drafted something that you guys were interested in. As I said, do we want to authorize certain department heads to spend money up to certain amounts, or do we want to, that's one way of doing it, or do you want to, there's, as I said, there's sort of, most of the purchasing policies have 1 to 3 or 4 tiers of what they're talking about. They're minor purchases up to a certain amount, then department heads, or with the approval of department heads, those purchases can be made. And then there's sort of an intermediate range where, as long as it's on a budgeted category and the foreman or whoever it is gets multiple quotes, you can spend up to a certain amount of money as long as there are multiple offers given. And then above a certain amount, maybe you can still have multiple quotes, but the board has to vote on it, not just it can't just be by the foreman or the. And then above an even higher threshold, it must, you have to follow, sealed bid, competitive bid procedures, and you probably want to specify that if it has to do with federal funds or even if it's a lower amount, you still follow that procedure because it's from a grant funded, because the federal regulations would require it anyway. So that's sort of how those are the sorts of broad categories that I'd like to think about doing, but I'm not wanted to know your pleasure on that before I wrote something up.
No, that makes sense.
And I'm not sure, we can obviously talk about nominal, the amounts that you want to approve for each department or whatever, but again, I think as long as we designate that a difference between amounts that are going to be spent on things that have been budgeted for, where it's very obvious that this, the select board has discussed purchasing. You're going to buy road salt every year, right? Or that's not a good example, but coal patch, for example. So that's a fairly minor, we spend about $5,000 a year on coal patch or something, or up to, sometimes less than that. And then the other philosophy that some towns it might be worthwhile to put this in. There are some circumstances where there's only one vendor, so we're only going to get power for this building from Green Mountain Power. We've only got maybe 3 places that we can buy stone or gravel from, for example. Sometimes there's even fewer. So some towns actually identify that, hey, our purchasing policy is that we get competitive bids for amounts above this, but these are the 3 places that we buy these materials from because we've identified that's the only place we're going to get, we can get them, or to go somewhere else would be, too expensive or something like that. So it might be, I don't know if I can draft something in terms of, I can think of certain categories that I've already mentioned, most of them, where we really only have one vendor that we can get things from.
Yeah.
And so those are kind of exceptions to the purchasing policy where we can, where the town has sort of pre-identified that we're going to divert from the purchasing policy because we can only find one source for these, or limited sources for. And then I know that there are some towns who will, even if there aren't limited sources, they'll just say, because of our previous relationship with this firm, frequently this has to do with engineering or IT systems, for example.
Yeah.
Certain contractors that the town's built a relationship with, you would prefer to work with them even if there are other services available. But it's situations like that, maybe worth reviewing period, over a certain, every 5 years or something like that.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if we do this anymore. Okay, so just to review, I think we'll have, we'll name, individuals who are authorized to make purchases on behalf of the town, the circumstances in which they're authorized to do that, particularly if it has to do with budgeted amounts for things. And then, as I say, we'll have an intermediate tier where they're required to get quotes before multiple quotes. And probably another tier where there were multiple quotes, but the board needs to approve them. And then finally, the highest would be competitive sealed bids. Okay, so I will draft something for you on that, and in the meantime, I will see if we can get some credit, get some more information on what general credit card options might be available to us.
Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned it to Deidre, send her that stuff.
Yeah.
We'll probably got something. Yeah, all right, okay. So this is kind of a basic overview of what we're providing right now for our employees. We have a 10-year scale for our paid leave. So essentially your first year, you're given 40 hours of vacation time, 40 hours of sick time, 8 hours of personal time, which, so if you started January 1st, this is prorated according to when you started, but if you started January 1st, you'd have 88 hours of leave that would be available to you, which would be the equivalent of 11 days. And then if you had comp time, I kind of gave a generic amount of comp time they might be able to work. So if you had the comp time and the hours, then you'd have more days available to you. But we're probably going to ignore this side of the sheet for right now, but just because the comp time kind of has to be separate from the discussion here. So, and then after 1 year, or excuse me, in your second year,
your vacation time goes up to 2 weeks. So the total amount of leave you have available to you is 16 hours, or 16 days. And then after 4 years, it's 3 weeks. And finally, if you're here for 10 years, you get 4 weeks. So that's our current policy. And under the current policy, there's different, all of these are applied slightly different. So you're given, the way that our policy is written, and we don't necessarily enforce it all to the letter here, but you're given a week and you're supposed to take 1 week of vacation. You're also given your one personal day and you're supposed to, it's take it or leave it in terms of if you don't take it, then you won't be paid out for it. The sick time and the vacation time can roll over. And you can carry up to 20 days of sick time, or of vacation from 1 year to another. And there's a cap of 30 days for vacation time that okay, so you can only have up to 1 month of vacation. Sick time, you're allowed to carry 24 days and from 1 year to another. And I think that is also the cap, I believe, in terms of the amount. And if you sit with sick leave, if someone terminates, they get paid out their vacation time that they haven't used, but only 50% of the sick time that they have banked. Okay, and then sort of within our sick time, you can also take up to 3 days of bereavement leave, which I've never been quite clear whether that's separate or it's its own, whether that's included in the 40 hours or if that's an additional 3 days on top of the 40 hours. But we haven't anybody used bereavement leave in several years. So this is the way it currently works, and I have another spreadsheet somewhere that shows like the accrual if you literally started working January 1st and you never took a day off for any reason, how soon you would get to those maxes, but it would take you several years to do it. And that, in general, that tends to be what towns are concerned about, is people building up a lot of leave and not using it, and then when they terminate, it suddenly is a large amount that the town is owing. But suffice to say, between vacation time, the cap of vacation time it's equal to 30 days, and then for sick time, it's 24 days. So the person's able to carry up to 54 days from 1 year to another under our current policy, which is quite a lot. So it's maybe a bit convoluted, and this, the way it's written in our policy right now, you just accrue your time. I think it is calculated monthly, but you're accruing on this for the year, but you can take it ahead of time and be in the bank, but it's just accrued in terms of service time, like in terms of how many months you've been with the town. The way I have a kind of complicated, but hopefully not too complicated way of thinking about this, sorry. So I would like to see it work where you're accruing it based on how many hours you work, rather than just being with the town for however many months. So I calculated that after holidays, there's 1,976 hours a year that somebody could be working for the town. And if in your first rate, your accrual rate is something like this, then the idea being that if the town gave you, as I mentioned before, right now we are giving people 40 hours of sick time, 8 hours of personal time, and 1 week of vacation when they start. And if we, and of that, they're supposed to take 1 week of vacation and 1 personal day that they're supposed to use regardless. So, in this situation, this base rate is the amount that would just be given to you. That you would be guaranteed to have 68 hours, and then you could accrue another 40 hours for the year, but you'd have to take 48 hours of the year. So at the end of the year, you could have you could earn up to 108, and you could carry forward up to 60 if you didn't get sick at all. And the idea being that if you didn't actually take the vacation or the personal leave, you could get paid out for it. That would be the idea. Okay, hopefully everybody's following me. I know it's kind of complicated, but anyway, and in this situation, instead of, as I mentioned before, under our current system, you can carry up to 30 days of vacation and 24 days of sick time at one point. And I instead in this just capped it at 320 hours, which is 40 days of total paid time off that you could accrue without. All right, and then each year, the longer you are with the town, or sorry, it's the same as their current structure, where in the second year you could accrue up to 80 hours on top of your base rate. So every year you get the same base amount, which is based on your sick time plus your personal time and the 1 week of vacation. And then there's an accrual rate which goes up as you accrue, you get service time. And again, the accrual is based on how many hours you work. So there's sort of a maximum and a minimum that you could accrue depending on how many hours you work, regular hours you work, I should say. And then again, there's a certain amount that you would have to use or get paid out for every year. And then at a certain point, if you didn't use it, there would be a cap. And I guess we could talk about how we would pay out the cap. If people ran into the cap, I think if people ran into the cap, we'd have to pay them a percentage rather than the full amount necessarily if we had to start paying people out. Because I guess, as I said, right now, we don't pay people out for all of their sick time. Or I think the town used to, but we don't under our current policy. If somebody were terminated, they would only get 50% of their sick time right now.
So on your accrual rate, are you accruing per pay period?
Yes, that would be the idea, is each pay period.
So,
yeah.
Pay period when someone's sick or...
Right.
So how does that work? So they're not gonna have time?
Right, so they wouldn't get any accrual, but they do have a base rate. Now, sorry, under our current policy, there is a probationary period where you don't get benefits until you've worked for the town for 3 months or whatever, up to 90 days. So there would be a 90-day buffer here if you were a brand new employee. But if on January 1st you were sick for the week, you could have time. You would already have time that you would be given to take that week off, but you wouldn't be accruing any extra time until you started working, until you took work hours. Yeah.
So what's the goal of this though? This whole process versus what we're doing today?
So,
I'm not saying this is right or wrong or...
Right, no, it's just fine. I'm trying to kind of basically keep the structure that we already have, but the idea here is to have one basket of time that they can use for whatever purpose, rather than having all these different rules with regard to... So this is complicated in terms of how it gets... It is more complicated as an idea in terms of how we calculate how much time they get, but it is less complicated in terms of how they use it and how many hours they... In this system, there's one cap for everything.
Right, but so who's going to be like monitoring and...
Right, so this would be between myself and Jane. But I would be monitoring the hours, but it would be, she and I would be working on each payroll to calculate these...
You sure you want to get yourself into that?
I think As long as we are accurately counting how many hours people are working, it's pretty simple, it's fairly simple mathematics.
I
Yeah.
have one
Yeah.
question about, and perhaps that's already kind of built in. So you're saying it's based on how many hours they're working.
Correct.
Does that cap out at 40, or is that including overtime?
I think it would have to include overtime.
Right.
Although it wouldn't be it wouldn't be time and a half on the overtime, probably. It would be, I think the benefits would just be on the hours.
Just on the hours,
I
right?
think that's right, yeah. I'm
I,
not sure if that's,
from
Yeah.
my recollection of
Yeah.
when I worked at the hospital, I don't think our overtime hours accrued more, but I think they still counted towards.
right, yeah. Because to me, they're still working. so-
Yeah, you're still working,
Right.
so, okay.
So I could figure that out in case, if in the extreme case of someone making a lot of overtime, obviously that would.
Well, we do have,
But under the
A
current
bit of
system, they
overtime,
get
yeah.
comp time for that if they want, so they have a more direct way of getting more time if they did it on. But I guess I should run this in an extreme example where somebody worked, a lot of overtime and could figure out how. I think we looked at the budget, when we looked at the budget last time, and this year, the crew hasn't really used many of their vacation and sick benefits because they've gotten so much comp time that they didn't really need them in order to take time, so, yeah, it's obviously a balancing act, but the idea with this is to make it simple so that the town is just providing them with one set of time that they can use for various purposes. Now, in this situation, I kept holidays separate from paid time off, but technically I could throw those in there. They would just get more mandatory time off because they would have to take holidays off. And we did talk with the crew, I did talk with the staff about possibly changing it so there was fewer holidays but more personal days instead. So they'd have more discretion about when they could take time off. But anyway, this is, I guess I should give you an example. I should have run an example according to how many, whether people earned a lot of overtime or not in terms of how that would affect how many hours they got in it. But the accrual rate is low enough that there's not a whole lot of difference between, as you can see here, the difference between someone taking all of their sick time or none of their sick time doesn't end up in a lot of difference between their accrual rates for the year in terms of how many hours they get.
So on an average pay period, how much are you accruing? How much is an average person going to accrue?
So in your first year, if you worked 8 hours, you'd be getting 1.6 hours of earned time off.
For 2 weeks?
For your first 2 weeks, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so about 1.5 hours for two. And then if you had been with the town longer, you would obviously be earning more time than that, so. I can give you, again, I'm sorry, this is not as well, it's not, I kind of worked out the system, but I didn't give a lot of examples of how it would be implemented, so I can provide those to you. But this is sort of what I came up with based on what we are already doing in terms of the policy and trying to replicate it in the aggregate. I grant you it is a little complicated, but I was just trying to be fair in terms of making sure that the same amount of time has to be taken off and the same amount of time is accrued, or similar amount of time is accrued. But doing it based on hours worked rather than just the amount of time that you work with the town. Which, so if someone was, really sick and used all of their, or for whatever reason missed a lot of work, I could also give an example of that. Is somebody had to take maybe not only all of the paid time off they have, but maybe they even had to take a leave of absence. What would that mean in terms of their accrual for the year? So I could come up with some alternative scenarios there to think about whether that would be, and then I would give you what it would be under our current policy versus if we did this. So okay. Is this, at first glance, is this too complicated, or might it make sense if I explained it a little better? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
no, that makes sense.
All right.
The one I dealt with previously, the holidays were just, I mean, if you took a holiday off, that was part of your
Paid time off.
paid time off.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
you know,
And when I talked-
whichever way, you know.
And I talked about this with our attorney, and you said that you could do that as well. It would just be, and then I guess it could be at the employee's discretion whether they took a holiday. We could give them more discretion in terms of which holidays they take as well, but, which they, as I said, in our conversations with them, they asked for a little bit more discretion, I think, or they would have traded a holiday for a personal day, which is, I think, how it used to. I think there were formerly fewer holidays and more personal days, and they seemed more interested in that. So, I mean, but we obviously can't have them choose. I still want them to, if they're going to take a holiday, it has to be on the day of holiday. They can't choose the 4th. The 5th of July is my 4th of July. That doesn't work. But I think we did have a couple of floating holidays at one point.
Yeah.
Veterans Day and.
Well, so
Right, yeah.
some people complained.
Right. Okay, well, I will provide you more of an idea about that at the next meeting.
Okay.
And then, as I said, if this, and I can also, I'll try to run this so that if this were implemented, what we would need to budget for it compared to what we're budgeting right now for the same idea, for the equivalent amount of work.
Is there anything else we need to discuss?
Yeah, on Jane's report, she would like to consider dedicating the 2025 annual report to Hubert in recognition of his long service and upcoming retirement in spring of 2026, and wanted to get the board's perspective on proceeding on that, because she's working with the printer on deadlines for the 2025 annual report. And certainly I had also discussed it. I don't see particular details in here about the actual, like the cover and the pictures and whatnot that could be included in the town report as far as, you know, our projects, the salt shed and things that we've done, like, hey, here's how we spent the money. And then just having photos, because I know that for a lot of people is pretty helpful to have a visual, and maybe they haven't seen it in live action. But as far as the dedication, I just from my own perspective, I think that's good, especially if he's truly retiring, as is his intent.
That's to be seen, I guess.
Yeah. The report's been dedicated to people before, but then stuck around for a while. Not employees, but as officers, yeah.
Yeah, not that we can't, and then he stays anyways. But I mean, the dedication does seem rather, final.
In terms of the cover, I haven't heard any other discussion. The only thing I will mention is that this is the 50th anniversary of the school being built, so that's one thing to consider. But
That might be a good cover, although.
Obviously, we will have some pictures of the salt shed. I'm not sure if we want to grace the cover with that, but
No, not necessarily on the cover. When Jane and I went to down in Burlington, there was like a whole conference, and they had certain towns out that were like, they were like the top 5 or whatever, and we could vote on what the top covers were. Not that I think that we need to necessarily try to win, but it would be cool to have something, I don't know, good just for our town meeting that would be nice to have on the cover. Not the salt shed, probably. I don't think I'd ever really recognized prior to being on the board about a dedication, so I think it's nice, regardless.
It's been most years the town, we've had a dedication
Yeah.
of some sort. Some towns go a little bit further than that in terms of having like not just a dedication, but like an in memoriam. We did do that during COVID because there were several people that we lost, but the only thing you get into that with that is like, well, welcome in. So and so wasn't in
Yeah.
right? You get into those issues, right? In general, we've usually kept it confined, honoring people who've done service to the town or the school or
Yeah, I think that makes sense as well.
but obviously that's, and then in terms of what's on the cover, sometimes that's been topical or you know, if we got a new fire truck, we put that on the cover a couple times, I think when we acquired the Historical Society, there was an artistic rendering of it on it, you know, there's been sometimes it's just been a landscape scene or something like that, but anyway, I just thought of the school just because of historical perspective, and also it's looking pretty good since they did the renovation a couple of years ago, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm certainly, that's just my suggestion, but,
One of the,
yeah.
I guess it was like a Zoom meeting that I attended. They were talking about that they had contests for, rather than just based on first come, first serve for dog license numbers, that they had a contest and like a raffle kind of thing of like the first 5 who applied to be able to be listed, because it's, I guess it's among dog owners, it's a pretty hot run to be able to get number 1 dog license.
They'll pay more for it.
I mean, there's revenue in lots of places.
Yeah, so I told Jane that, you know, I was gonna defer to her for the most part on the aesthetics of the report, but I think she's reached out to Debbie, because Debbie was usually pretty involved in that in the past, so
Good.
I'm sure she'll have some ideas for us about what to do with her, but
Yeah, so it was a nice idea.
we'll proceed accordingly here, and I'll try to, I'm assuming when we, I should mention that when we have our budget meeting, we will need at some point to plan future, what we're gonna do in January, when we wanna meet in January, because I assume there'll be at least one, if not 2 more meetings, and one of those meetings will probably also finalize the warning and this, you know, what's gonna be featured in the town report. So we can, just a reminder, I'll put that on the agenda for the December 18th meeting to plan the January meetings. Okay,
All right. So take a motion to adjourn for the evening.
I'll make a motion.
I second that.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, Jerry.